Whoop whoop. What up, fam? This is I guess you call it the part 2 of message to the FBI director, or current director of the FBI. It's also not only a message to the current director of the FBI and the organization as a whole. This is also a from the kitchen table message to the entire Juggalo community. Anybody that winds up viewing this shit, if anybody winds up viewing this, outside of the wonderful 19 subscribers that I have. Whoop whoop to my 19 subscribers. So, but yeah, this is it's about that gang label that the FBI so lovingly put on us Juggalos. Okay, so the whole gang label thing. Did some sniffing around to figure out what the fuck really happened. How did it really come about? What was the whole all-in-all mechanism? Now, I uploaded earlier on this particular channel a frontal lobotomy with Occam's razor by a wicked clown, and in that particular Wicked Clown Blow Your Dumb Science Show episode, I'm using Occam's razor to come to the conclusion that the person ultimately responsible for the reason of the Juggalo gang label was one Sharon Osbourne. Now that's my personal fucking opinion, and if you watch that episode, you'll see how I arrived at that conclusion. But it all stemmed from a 2008 Howard Stern interview in which Shaggy Two Dope, as I explained in the video, told Sharon that, you know, he wasn't afraid of her, wasn't anything that they could do, and the Juggalo gang label gets applied exactly the next year after their most successful year as an industry. So anyway, in that episode of Wicked Clown Blow Your Dumb Science Show, come to that conclusion. So what ultimately, internally, mechanismally happened was really freaking heinous, and I'm kind of like scratching my head as to, is this really legal for a law enforcement agency to do this shit? Like, literally do what they just did to the Juggalos with the gang label? The first thing I had to check out was to see if in fact the gang label was still there, if it was still actually on the books, because I've heard from legal professionals that it's not enforced, that it's not there. Like, there was a lot of like fog as to whether or not it's there. And yeah, it's there on the books, and it's one of there's only, from what I've been able to research and find out, there's currently only 5 states, and my data is a few years old, so I don't know about the political climate now, if it's changed, but there's only 5 states in which the state attorney generals were actually pursuing the Juggalos as a gang label thing, where like if you had this shit, law enforcement could stop you and search you and harass you basically on the grounds that, you know, you're a gang member, and that's what they do to gang members, because you might be carrying drugs, or you might be carrying illicit weapons, or you might be up to some no good gangster shit. There's an actual process that has to take place for all of that to happen. So anyway, there's only like 5 states. There might be more. Put in the comments box, you know, any corrections to that, where it's actually prosecuted. Diamond sticks, blunt. Me and Nasty Green Ninja Star are going to smoke this, because what I'm about to get into is going to be kind of hizzy heavy. So that interview on Howard Stern happens in the year of 2008. The wheels of justice and the political climate moves kind of slow as molasses. But in 2010, 2 years later, and 2 years before, I believe, the gang label, anyway, so
Thank you.
this is the heinous shit. You ready? Here we go. In 2010 in Nightline, they let the public know, and the whole Juggalo world know, if they were paying attention to the actual, news story without screaming at the television screen at the bullshit, as to what was going down. And what was going down was law enforcement were collecting evidence to support organized crime activity shit. Law enforcement was going around collecting all these things, right? From the aforementioned, political inner workings of what was going on within the people who were pulling the strings at the Justice Department, certain FBI agents were presumably, based on how things work within the organization, were given a task force, were assigned to a task force. Thank you. And their task was to collect intelligence and evidence as to the criminal organization and inner workings of Juggalos as an organized crime syndicate. And their message, their belief was that the music produced at Psychopathic Records was how messages were getting out to the gang and organizing criminal activity within the community and so on and so forth. And they had no idea that they were news stories turned into songs, basically. So anyway, one of the things that I came to learn was the FBI sets up task forces to monitor these activities. And who's to say, in light of all of the stuff that we've discovered now about certain people within the FBI during certain administrations, that they're prone to falsifying or exaggerating claims that didn't happen. But anyway, you have this task force that's collecting all of this information from around the United States. And their criteria was anything that was produced by Psychopathic Records. T-shirts, CDs, stickers, posters, clothing, not just T-shirts, but clothing, jewelry, anything that was produced by Psychopathic Records was the criteria for this task force to gather up this information. So any Joe average criminal, whether they're mentally ill, whether they're drunk and fucked up, it doesn't matter. Whenever law enforcement showed up and collected evidence from the scene, there was photographs of whatever, it would wind up going to this task force, and they compiled all this information. And this is important because the FBI needed precedent. They needed this thing called precedent to legally move forward with labeling Juggalos as a gang, because that's taking away certain civil liberties and freedoms that every citizen of the United States is inalienably guaranteed. And so when they were moving forward with the gang label, they were moving forward looking to take away those freedoms and those rights, such as the freedom to not be harassed by law enforcement because you're wearing, Psychopathic Record paraphernalia. or as we call it, merch, as the rest of the world calls it, merch. So the other thing that the main critical thing that the gang label does, though, is it makes an entity unable to sell or market or do any type of thing, their merchandise in stores. And this is important. I'll come back to this point later on. But that's what it means. So like that's why as soon as the gang label happened, all the T-shirts disappeared out of Walmart, posters disappeared out of Walmart, Spencer's, Hot Topic, all the places that people were able to go and get the shit, boom, gone. So, and I don't know if that's still the way it is, but I can't find anything where I live where, like, you should be able to find it. After spending a couple years gathering this information, 2-3 years gathering this information, they then, the FBI being the FBI then puts together a narrative, cobbles together a narrative to explain to a judge why they should be given precedent to label ICP as a gang, or anybody, or any juggalos as a gang, anything affiliated with psychopathic records as gang paraphernalia, and then move forward with that precedent. And so they take all of these really heinous, fucked up crimes and all of this other criminal activity, they spin it together as it's a multinational, multi-state criminal organization. Now, unfortunately, all of the juggalos involved, some of whom were mentally ill and were forced to sign things or do confessions under duress without legal representation. Other people were mentally incapacitated due to shock of the situation or drugs and alcohol. And they, same thing, forced into confession without legal representation. And because this is a common tactic that is done by law enforcement, they try to get you to confess to a crime before you have a lawyer. And they say that, well, yeah, you can wait for a lawyer, but you're gonna have to sit here in this room until your lawyer shows up, and it's Friday, and they're not gonna be coming in until Monday. And so, and that's illegal to do that. They can't hold you for that long. But most people don't know that. And if you're mentally ill, you really don't know that. If you're incapacitated, you're not even thinking about that shit. So anyway, under duress, they get these confessional statements. They spin this narrative together. They present it to a judge. All the while, the people that they're investigating have no idea that they're being investigated as a whole. There's no legal notification to anybody that this is going on. That's another, like, what the fuck? And so the judge, being shown all this heinous shit with this well-spun narrative by these accredited FBI agents, which we've learned some of them aren't all that great. There were quite a few problems internally with the FBI, with several agents falsifying. Like, it's already like blown up in the last 3.5 years with all these internal investigations of shit, right? So it's not too far-fetched to assume that the FBI agents working on the task force of the Juggalo gang, made some shit up and sell it to a judge. Judge gives them precedent, and then they take it to the President of the United States. And at the time, I believe in 2012, Barack Obama was the President of the United States. And it's a quick in and out meeting with the president. They show that they have this judge's precedent. They show the president some really nasty pictures of things that juggalos are supposed to have done. as a gang for whatever bullshit reason that they tell the president, and then he gives them the authorization to take away their civil liberties, labeling them as a gang. That's the step-by-step process, from what I have understood. I might be completely off the fucking rails on this because I'm not a lawyer. I never went to law school. It was just shit that I, sniffed out through the, online mediums, basically, of actual, legal places, not just Joe Blow average shit. But anyway, there's a step-by-step process that the FBI had to do in order to label Juggalos as a gang. And at no point during that step-by-step process was anybody legally notified that they were being investigated. Nobody. Right? And the people involved were in different states. Like, all of this shit happened in different states, so nobody knew each other as to what was going on. Because none of the criminals were actually, real juggalos. They just had the music, or they had the paraphernalia because they liked the shit, they liked the music, what the fuck ever. But they were doing stupid shit, and they got themselves caught. That being said, it's now 11 years after the fact. There's a lot of people that don't even know. They come into the dark carnival and they don't even know about this gang label thing that hangs overhead, right? It's kind of in the background. And the reality is, when all of that stuff is taken in as a whole, that the FBI took all of these different patchwork cases from all of these different states, and they put together this Frankenstein monster that they claimed to be the Juggalo gang, and they presented that to a judge, and the judge gave them the precedent to take it to the president, and they took it to the president, and the president said, oh shit, and this is an evil monster, and then boom, they got the gang label, right? All of that is discrimination at best and slander at worst. Because in the last 11 years, there's nothing. It's a huge nothing burger legally, right? There's been some weird sick fucks that tried to hide out in the Juggalo community. They're not part of the Juggalo family. They're not, they might have been fans of the music, they might have been, wearing the makeup, but there's a lot of people that can put on a suit and pretend. There's a lot of people that can put on a suit and pretend, But I don't know how many times, maybe somebody out there in the community could help me, but I don't know how many times Psychopathic Records has been audited by the IRS, or Shaggy has been audited by the IRS, or Violent J has been audited, or anybody involved in that has been audited by the IRS, trying to find, illicit gains or criminal activity, through illicit gains, and all of it's come up nothing, absolutely nothing. Turns out, every time the IRS does it, they see how charitable Juggalos are, how much we give back to the community, and but none of that ever gets, it never gets brought up, right? What's funny about the whole gang label thing is, if you go through YouTube, right, and you look at ICP interviews in from 97 through 2008, 2009, everybody loves them. Even Dr. Phil, they were on the fucking Dr. Phil show schooling some young rapper dude, right? And Dr. Phil said that he was a huge fan of ICP. Dr. Phil, I mean, and the other part of the discrimination is there's a lot of like well-known actual gangsters still selling their shit. Hardcore well-known actual gangsters still selling their shit. In all the markets and in all the places where ICP used to sell their shit, but can't because they're labeled as a gang, you can go buy a fucking Snoop Dogg poster.
Snoop Dogg bong.
You can buy a Snoop Dogg bong, man. Fuck, you can buy Ice Cube's latest movie. And I'm not cracking on those guys, because I love those guys. I love their art. And one of the other issues that's like important in this whole thing, aside from the gang people that are still like actual gang members that are still merchandising their shit, are, according to the FBI's criteria that they used to label juggalos as a gang, okay, according to that criteria alone, and this is one of the huge discrimination factors, okay, is they used that criteria against only one social body, collective social body, and that's fans that are like uber fans of ICP and the music of Psychopathic Records, and that whole music genre, I should say, not just ICP, but the whole music genre. There's a whole list of people that call themselves juggalos within the music industry, the independent music industry. So anyway, in that whole independent music industry, there's a lot of juggalos. And so the FBI used this criteria to label all of those people as a gang, as one social group. But they didn't do the same thing to other social groups who've engaged in the actual crimes that the FBI was accusing the juggalos of engaging in. Various religious bodies or organizations are what comes to my mind, because like, how many moonshiners are Baptists? I'm just going to start picking on some people here. I know a lot of evangelical serial killers killing in the name of God. That's like they're killing in the name of their religion. They believe they have a God-given right to do what they're doing. Why aren't they, labeled as a gang? Because they've actually like done this shit, right? They've done all this heinous stuff, but they never get included or grouped in. And my go-to favorite's always the Catholics. Like, that whole organization is an organized crime organization that actual organized crime syndicates pattern and structure their hierarchy off of. The Don is the local pope for that family, right? So, but yeah, I mean, it's why are those organizations, those followers, not labeled as a gang, but juggalos are, when there's like actual same recorded crimes. You could go through and do the same thing, cherry pick different crimes from different states, only there's a lot more of them going on. Here in the city that I live in, Robert Yates, people in the FBI, Robert Yates. Okay, you know that name, Robert Yates. He's the Spokane serial killer. He's on world tour, right? Why was he doing what he was doing? Because he was on a mission from God. That he had this whole God complex tie-in thing to killing prostitutes and cleaning the world of these things, right? He's a hitman for God, for his church. Technically, that's what I would see, right? Why don't you label that church or that religious organization as a gang? Meth-addicted pedophile preachers out of the Midwest. How many news stories in the last decade have you heard of that? Go last 20 years. you can like, they keep coming. They keep coming. Why are they not labeled as gangs? It beats me. But that's the discrimination right there. You, the FBI, have chosen to label one social body based on this heinous evidence that you've cobbled together, but you ignore labeling any other social body, and instead, those people, those other social bodies, get nonprofit tax exempt status, and they get the ability to have money flow in on the grounds of charity, and those people can use that as like a tax exemption thing. And so they're making money off of taxpayers doing their heinous crimes. See, that's a problem. So that's the discrimination, serious discrimination aspect that is going to be the hypocrisy of the federal system. You know, for the purpose and intent of discrimination at best or slander at worst. Because the only thing that the gang label ultimately has done has like slightly dented the merchandising arm of Psychopathic Records, which, going back to my frontal lobotomy with Occam's razor by a wicked clown episode, I talk about how Sharon Osbourne gets fixated on most of their money is made through their marketing and merchandising, or she believed most of their money was made through their marketing and merchandising. And you can buy shit online now and have it direct shipped to you and stuff, but you know, it's a generational thing now. You know, and so since we're coming on 4 generations of juggalos, one of the things that the FBI, Mr. Director, current director of the FBI, or the current president, Joe Biden, who was the vice president at the time that the gang label was put on, you know, maybe you guys should just think about getting rid of the gang label, because the next step that Juggalo Professor going to be doing, and following up on the story, is I'm going to take this complaint to the ACLU and the Peace and Justice Action League and say, like, hey, this is what's happening. This is what I believe happened. This is the evidence that I have. What do you say about, you know, giving some advice? But yeah, there's absolutely no grounds for the claim other than a made up story, a well made up story that was made up and done behind the scenes. Then when it came to trial, it was you know, discrimination and First Amendment rights. And it's not even a First Amendment right thing. It's just straight up flat out discrimination. There's no legal reason for juggalos to be labeled as a gang. Absolutely none. And I would love to see if, in fact, some of the stuff that was presented to the judge by the FBI was falsified or exaggerated. I would really love to see that. That's going to be something that I ask the ACLU. Is there any way that we can find out? Because this is a violation of civil liberties. It's a discrimination case. FBI, Mr. President, former Vice President, to the president that gave the gang label, you know, please get rid of it. And don't do it discreetly. You know, don't just like, and then send out a notice saying that here it is, blah, 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 blah. You know, be forthright about it. You know, have a little small press conference or something, you know, something, please. Anyway, for the rest of the Juggalo family, please stay tuned, because very soon, can't say like within the next day or two, but very, very soon, next couple weeks, I am going to be contacting the ACLU about this and asking them straight up, this is what I've observed, this is the evidence I have, this is what I believe happened, This is what I believe is a violation of the civil liberties, and this is what I want to find out, you know. So, that being said, whoop the fuck, whoop, whoop. I'll be uploading another video real soon about the medical e-bikes that's coming up. So, share those with friends. Thanks for listening to me to ramble for the last half hour from my kitchen table about this bullshit. Whoop whoop.